Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Green and I'll be presenting the book Johnstown Flood by David McCullough. Let's start with a summary of the event. Essentially, the largest man-made dam by the 19th century was constructed for trade and looked like a lake. It was initially used for trade in the canals, but once trains made this way of transportation and trade less effective, it became a site primarily used for recreational fishing. A group of very rich men, some of whom you've probably heard of, including Andrew Mellon, the Carnegies, and the Phipps, all invested in a country club of sorts called the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club that was right next to this dammed lake area. With the purchase of this land came the lake. They did a great job of keeping locals off of the lake, thereby cementing their ownership and consequently their responsibility of the lake. While it was a well-known scary story among small children in Johnstown, no one believed the dam would actually break. On May 31st, 1889, paranoia proved prudent and the dam snapped. Instead of slowly coming undone, it crashed through the valley, killing over 2,000 people and taking the possessions and livelihoods of thousands more. Was the government that initially built the dam to blame, or was it the rich boys that failed to maintain the dam? A freak accident of Mother Nature, or a visitation from Providence, like the club claimed? David McCullough took an incredibly quick event, approximately 10 minutes of live action, and turned it into several dozen personal narratives spanning over, 50, almost 100 years. Starting from the earliest days of constructing the dam and ending well past lawsuits for liability and damages, McCullough gives the perspective of victims, witnesses, local towns, the media, and the members of South Fork. Unbiased and seemingly based in facts, the book does not make it incredibly easy to find blame in one player or another. The government did build a bad dam. The boys' club did not maintain it and frankly did not concern themselves with the effects that a break would have on the population down the valley from them. And the people of the town talked for years about the issues at South Fork and never tried to fix anything. The author's interests seem to be entirely historical, not calling for readers to side with one party or another. Additionally, the author did a great job of providing the point of view of many stakeholders. This leads me to believe that he finds the most valuable illustration of an event the first or third person narrative. This appreciation for a diverse number of point of views is indicative of the author's desire to write an accurate but engaging account of a historical event that did, in fact, shape emergency management. So shaping emergency management policy for years to come. His effort at pure journalism is evident in this book as it leaves you with sympathy for all and a better understanding of the event. I would assume that this style of writing, which exemplifies the importance of all stakeholders being involved, would encourage just that. All stakeholders being involved in all stages. The author does a great job of presenting conflicting stories and accounts to get the reader to think about this from different perspectives. Additionally, there were different and inconsistent responses to these accounts by stakeholders. There didn't seem to be a chain of command, and the people affected were surviving primarily on the charity of others. Pittsburgh took on most of the victims, and there was involvement from church groups, the Masons, the Republican Club, and factory workers. And it should be noted, too, that this is one of the American Red Cross's first responses as well. Everyone was contributing something to the people who had lost everything. So this emphasis on stakeholders mattering probably shaped emergency management's emphasis on stakeholder involvement. Additionally, communication was a huge failing point in the response to this disaster. They had people reporting different events. There was no centralized expert on the topic. There was a lack of widespread warnings to stakeholders who might have the capacity to incite change. So this failure for communication hopefully inspired change with response action networks. And I'm well aware that there weren't any widespread best practices for emergency management at the time. But hopefully this event inspired some change. So as for additional resources, most of what I could find was entirely historical accounts. There weren't a ton of opinion pieces, especially outside of the Pittsburgh area. So Also, for these additional resources, I want to note that a lot of the articles I read online, none here, but I mean, even with the National Park Service, did a bit of borrowing from Mr. McCullough's book that I just read, so it was interesting reading a lot of his summaries being reused online by other articles. So first, for the entirely historical articles, the History.com article, the first one, and then also the Johnstown Flood Museum, a background article, were both historical pieces that aided in just describing the disaster and its effects more than anything else. So these authors really lacked bias in their stories. Their stories were very similar. They didn't leave the reader feeling additional feelings towards one party or another. And in general, they were pretty in line with what the rest of the world was saying about the event. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, however, paints an incredibly damning picture of the wealthy men in the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. Not only do they place the blame solely with the club members who failed to maintain the dam, they criticized their legal defense in court, insinuated that donations that were made to the community and families by club members were entirely out of guilt. And I mean, this article came out like 120 years after the event, so I'm not sure if there was some sort of familial connection or if it was purely geographical, because Pittsburgh did take the brunt of refugees from this. But there was clearly like some anger in the article that revealed the bias. And lastly, the book by Willis Johnson, had many great accounts of the events in the first person. So the most notable part, I think, of that, the part that seemed to be different from other people's accounts, was that she claims there was ample time to evacuate and social pressures are what actually caused people to stay. So this would have different emergency management implications than if the communications around the event were just blurred. So I find that interesting as well, but because she was doing primarily first-person accounts, I didn't see a lot of bias in her articles. Additionally, I'd say I have to agree with all the articles here. The historical count seemed accurate, but also it does kind of seem like the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club was in the best position to repair the dam and, you know, help people back up their lives, and it seems like just a few individual members with guilt in their hearts were the only ones to actually do so. So I do kind of agree with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette article after reading all of these historical notes. Here are my APA citations. I appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback and your questions. Thanks. Bye.